My name is Garrett, 61 years old, and I have worked hard all my life to provide for my family, especially my son, Lucas. At last year's Christmas party, something unbelievable happened. My billionaire son hugged me in front of everyone and casually asked, "Dad, hope you are enjoying your $8,000 a month allowance." I was completely shocked. "What allowance? I am working 60 hours a week at 3 jobs," I replied. The room fell silent, and my daughter-in-law suddenly froze, her face turning pale as snow. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you are watching from and subscribe to hear more real-life family stories that might resonate with your own experiences. I spent 35 years of my life working at the local manufacturing plant in our small Midwestern town. It was not glamorous work, but it paid the bills and provided good benefits for my family. My wife Sarah and I had our son Lucas when we were both 25, and we were determined to give him opportunities we never had. Sarah was the love of my life. We met in high school and married right after graduation. She was smart, kind, and had this incredible laugh that could light up the darkest room. She worked as a school secretary while I put in long hours at the factory. We were not rich, but we were happy. Our small 3-bedroom house on Maple Street was filled with love and laughter. Everything changed when Lucas was 10. Sarah was diagnosed with aggressive breast cancer. Despite fighting bravely for nearly a year, I lost her when Lucas was 11. Her death devastated us both. I still remember standing at her funeral, holding Lucas's small hand, wondering how I would raise our son alone. After Sarah died, I made a promise to myself, and to her memory, that Lucas would have every opportunity to succeed. I picked up overtime whenever it was available. I worked holidays, weekends, night shifts, anything to save money for Lucas's college fund. My own parents had never had the means to help me with education, and I had always regretted not being able to go to college. Lucas would have that chance. Lucas was a brilliant kid. He inherited his mother's sharp mind and my determination. Throughout middle school and high school, he maintained perfect grades. He was particularly gifted in mathematics and computer science. By his senior year, he was already designing simple apps and learning advanced programming languages. I did not understand most of what he was doing, but I was incredibly proud. When Lucas was accepted to MIT with a partial scholarship, I was overjoyed. It was not a full ride, though, which meant I needed to help with the remaining tuition room and board and other expenses. I remortgaged our house, worked even more overtime, and sometimes took on weekend landscaping jobs for extra cash. I never told Lucas how tight money was. I just wanted him to focus on his studies. During college, Lucas thrived. He double majored in computer science and business, graduating with honors. He then went on to earn his MBA from Stanford again, with my financial support. By this time, I had depleted most of my savings and taken on significant debt, but seeing my son excel made every sacrifice worthwhile. After graduate school, Lucas moved to Silicon Valley and founded a tech startup with 2 classmates. They developed an innovative artificial intelligence platform for financial services. I did not fully understand the technology, but I knew it was impressive. Within 3 years, their company was valued at over $100 million. By the 5th year, they had expanded globally, and the valuation had reached over $1 billion. My son, the son of a factory worker, had become a billionaire before turning 35. It was during this meteoric rise that Lucas met Victoria. She came from old money, her father being the CEO of a major investment firm. She was beautiful, polished, and moved in elite social circles. When Lucas brought her to meet me, I felt immediately out of place. She was pleasant enough, commenting on how quaint my home was, but I could sense her discomfort. Still, Lucas seemed happy, and that was all that mattered to me. They married in a lavish ceremony at her family's estate in Connecticut. I felt out of place among the hundreds of wealthy guests, wearing the only suit I owned, which was nearly 20 years old. Lucas insisted I stand proudly beside him, but I noticed how Victoria's family kept their distance, offering polite but brief conversations. After the wedding, things began to change. Lucas's calls became less frequent. He missed my birthday that year, then Thanksgiving. When I called him, he was always busy with meetings or traveling for business. I understood he had a demanding life now, but the distance between us grew increasingly painful. Around this time, I reached retirement age. After 35 years at the plant, I was looking forward to some rest. However, when I received my first pension check, reality hit hard. Between the loans I had taken for Lucas's education, the medical bills from Sarah's illness that I was still paying off, and the increasing cost of living, my pension simply was not enough. I needed to keep working. I found a job as a security guard at a nearby office building, working the night shift from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. On weekends, I delivered food for a local restaurant. During holiday seasons, I also picked up shifts at the neighborhood grocery store. At 61, I was working more hours than I had at 40. My back ached constantly, and I was always tired, but I had no choice if I wanted to keep my modest home and put food on the table. Despite my busy schedule, I still tried to maintain contact with Lucas. I would leave voicemails, send text messages, and even wrote emails, though I was not very comfortable with computers. Responses became increasingly rare. When we did speak, our conversations were brief and superficial. I heard about his business successes, but knew little about his personal life. For nearly 2 years, I did not see my son in person. Then last December, I received an elegant envelope in the mail. It was an invitation to Lucas and Victoria's Christmas party at their new $20 million estate in Atherton. I was both excited and nervous. Finally, a chance to reconnect with my son, but also an intimidating glimpse into a world I did not belong in. I saved up to buy a new suit for the occasion. Nothing fancy, just a simple blue suit from the department store, but it was the best I could afford. I even splurged on a haircut at a proper barbershop instead of cutting it myself, as I had been doing to save money. I wanted to look presentable for my son and his wealthy friends. The night of the party, I took a bus and then walked the last half mile to their estate, not wanting to arrive in a taxi that I could barely afford. As I approached the massive iron gates and saw the sprawling mansion beyond, illuminated with thousands of Christmas lights, my stomach tightened with anxiety. This was my son's life now, a world away from the modest home where I had raised him. The moment I stepped through the grand double doors of Lucas's mansion, I felt like I had entered another planet. Crystal chandeliers hung from soaring ceilings. A massive Christmas tree that must have been at least 15 feet tall stood in the center of the foyer, decorated with what looked like actual gold ornaments and twinkling lights. Men in tuxedos and women in evening gowns mingled with champagne flutes in hand. The marble floors gleamed so brightly I could almost see my reflection. A butler, an actual butler, took my worn winter coat and asked for my name. When I told him I was Lucas's father, his eyebrows raised slightly before he composed himself and directed me toward the main reception room. I clutched the small gift I had brought, a hand-carved wooden box I had made myself during rare free hours, feeling increasingly self-conscious. What had seemed like a thoughtful, personal gift now felt inadequate among the luxury surrounding me. In the main hall, at least 50 people were engaged in animated conversation. Business tycoons, tech entrepreneurs, and what appeared to be minor celebrities filled the room. I recognized a few faces from business magazines I had flipped through at the doctor's office. Everyone exuded wealth and confidence. Women wore jewelry that probably cost more than my house, and the men discussed million-dollar deals as casually as I would talk about the weather. Victoria's family was easy to spot. Her father, William Thompson, was a tall, imposing man with silver hair and a perpetual expression of mild disdain. Her mother, Elizabeth, was elegantly dressed in what I assumed was a designer gown, her neck and wrists adorned with diamonds. They were surrounded by people who laughed too loudly at their jokes and nodded enthusiastically at their opinions. I stood awkwardly near a towering ice sculpture of a reindeer, not sure where to go or who to talk to. A server offered me champagne, which I accepted gratefully, hoping it would calm my nerves. I sipped it slowly, knowing I could not afford to lose my composure in this environment. After about 15 minutes of standing alone, I finally saw Lucas enter the room. He looked different, more polished than I remembered. His custom suit probably cost more than my car, and he wore an expensive watch that caught the light as he gestured while speaking. Despite the changes, when he smiled, I still saw my boy, the son I had raised alone after Sarah died. Lucas spotted me and his face lit up. He excused himself from the group he was talking to and made his way across the room. "Dad," he exclaimed, embracing me warmly. "You made it. I am so glad you are here." The hug felt genuine, and for a moment the awkwardness melted away. "I would not have missed it, son," I replied, patting his back. "This place is really something." Lucas beamed with pride. "Let me give you a tour later. First, there are some people I want you to meet." He led me around the room, introducing me to business partners and friends. Most were polite, though their interest waned quickly when they learned I was a retired factory worker. I noticed several exchanging glances when Lucas mentioned I was his father. Throughout this time, I kept looking for Victoria. I finally spotted her across the room, deep in conversation with her parents. She glanced over, saw me with Lucas, and quickly averted her eyes. Throughout the next hour, she seemed to be deliberately avoiding us, always finding a reason to be in a different part of the room. As the evening progressed, waiters served elaborate hors d'oeuvres and refreshed drinks. Lucas was frequently pulled away by guests wanting his attention. Each time he apologized and promised to return, but the intervals grew longer. I found myself alone again, watching the glittering crowd from the periphery. After dinner was announced, Lucas reappeared at my side. He seemed slightly more relaxed, perhaps, from the several glasses of wine I had seen him consume. He put his arm around my shoulders in a gesture that felt somewhat performative, as several people were watching. "Dad," he said loudly, so those nearby could hear, "hope you are enjoying your $8,000 a month allowance. Is it making retirement more comfortable?" I stared at him confused. "What allowance? I am working 60 hours a week at 3 jobs," I replied, not understanding what he was talking about. The smile froze on Lucas's face. A sudden silence fell over those standing near us. I looked around, bewildered by the reaction. That is when I saw Victoria, who had finally approached us, stop dead in her tracks. The color drained from her face, and she looked as though she might faint. Lucas's arm dropped from my shoulders. "What do you mean 3 jobs? You are supposed to be retired. I have been sending you money every month for the past 2 years." Now it was my turn to freeze. "Lucas, I have not received any money from you, not a penny." Victoria suddenly turned and rushed out of the room, drawing the attention of several guests. Lucas stared after her, a look of confusion and dawning comprehension crossing his face. "Dad, come with me," he said quietly, guiding me away from the curious onlookers and toward his private study. As we left the main hall, I caught a glimpse of William Thompson, watching us with narrowed eyes, his hand on his wife's arm, as they both observed their daughter's hasty exit. Lucas closed the heavy oak door of his study behind us, muffling the sounds of the party. The room was lined with bookshelves and featured a large desk with multiple computer monitors. He turned to me, his expression troubled. "Dad, are you saying you have never received the monthly transfers I have been making $8,000 on the 15th of every month for the past 2 years?" I shook my head, still trying to process what he was saying. "No, Lucas. I have not received anything like that. I have been working as a night security guard delivering food on weekends and taking shifts at Greenfield Grocery during the holidays just to make ends meet. Lucas ran his hands through his hair, a gesture that reminded me so much of when he was a frustrated teenager struggling with a difficult homework assignment. This does not make any sense. I set up the transfers myself. Victoria said she had spoken to you about it, that she had helped set up the account. Victoria and I have barely spoken in the last 2 years, I said quietly. In fact, I have been trying to reach you for months. I left messages, sent texts. I thought you were just too busy for your old man. Dad, Lucas said, his voice cracking slightly. I never got any messages from you. Not one. Lucas sat down heavily in his leather office chair, his face a mask of confusion and growing anger. He pulled out his phone and began scrolling through his banking app. Here, he said, turning the screen toward me. Look at these transactions. Every month, $8,000 transferred to an account at First National Bank. Victoria told me she had set up the account for you when you mentioned you did not want your friends at the local bank to know you were receiving money from me. She said you were too proud. I leaned forward, squinting at the tiny text on the screen. Sure enough, there they were, monthly transactions labeled Dad's Allowance, going back 2 years. Lucas, I never said anything like that, I replied, shaking my head. And I do not have an account at First National Bank. I have had the same checking account at Midwest Community Bank for 30 years. Lucas's expression darkened. He turned to his computer and began typing rapidly. Let me check something, he muttered. While Lucas worked on his computer, I sat down in one of the visitor chairs, my mind racing. 2 years of monthly payments of $8,000. That was nearly $200,000 that I never received money that could have spared me countless nights of exhaustion, worry, and physical pain from working so hard at my age. I need the account number this money was going to, Lucas said, more to himself than to me. He picked up his phone and dialed a number. James, it is Lucas. I need you to do something for me right now, and yes, I know it is Christmas Eve. James must have been his personal banker, because Lucas then began giving instructions about tracing the account where the money had been sent. He put the phone on speaker and placed it on the desk between us. Mr. Westfield, that account is registered to Atherton Holdings, LLC, the banker said after a few minutes of keyboard clicking. It appears to be a private investment company. Lucas's eyes narrowed. Who is the signatory on the account? More keyboard sounds. There are 2 signatories, sir. Victoria Westfield and a William Thompson. I watched as my son's face transformed, shock giving way to understanding, and then to rage. He thanked the banker curtly and ended the call. Dad, he said, his voice unnaturally calm. Victoria has been stealing from you, from both of us. That company belongs to her and her father. They manage some of their smaller investments through it. The realization hit me like a physical blow. My daughter-in-law had been diverting money meant for me into her own accounts. For 2 years, while I worked night shifts with an aching back, she had been taking money that could have given me a comfortable retirement. But why would she do that? I asked, though even as I spoke, pieces started falling into place in my mind. Lucas stood up and began pacing. And those messages, you mentioned the ones I never received. Let me check something else. He picked up his phone again and went into his settings. After a few swipes and taps, his face contorted in anger. She blocked your number on my phone, he said, holding up the screen to show me. And I just remembered a couple of years ago, Victoria insisted on setting up a spam filter for my email. She said I was getting too much junk mail. His voice was rising as the implications became clear. She must have been deleting your emails before I ever saw them. Dad, she cut you off from me completely. The pain of this revelation was almost physical. For 2 years, I had believed my son had become too successful, too busy for his old father. I had accepted it with sadness, but without complaint, telling myself it was natural for children to move on. All that time it had been Victoria deliberately keeping us apart. Did she say anything about me? I asked, dreading the answer, but needing to know. Lucas sat back down, looking defeated. She told me you were doing great, enjoying retirement. When I suggested visiting you, she always had a reason why it wasn't a good time. She said you were traveling or busy with new friends, or that you had told her you needed space to create your new life after retirement. He looked at me, anguish in his eyes. I believed her, Dad. I trusted her. I reached across the desk and put my hand on his arm. She's your wife, Lucas. Of course you trusted her. Lucas shook his head. About 6 months ago, when I suggested we invite you to stay for a week, she said. You had told her that seeing my success made you uncomfortable, that you felt out of place in my new life. She said it would be kinder not to put you in that position. His voice broke. I thought I was respecting your wishes by staying away. The cruelty of these lies stunned me. Victoria had not only stolen money from me, but she had also robbed Lucas and me of 2 years of our relationship. She had created a false narrative where I was happy and content enjoying financial security, while in reality I was working multiple jobs just to survive. Lucas, I said gently, why did you never call me directly to confirm any of this? He looked ashamed. I did try a few times, but when the calls wouldn't go through, I assumed you had changed your number. Victoria said you had mentioned getting a new phone. And with how busy things were with the company going public and building this house, he trailed off, recognizing the weakness of his excuse. Our conversation was interrupted by a sharp knock at the door. Without waiting for a response, Victoria's father, William Thompson, entered the study. His commanding presence filled the room as he closed the door behind him. Lucas, what's going on? Victoria is quite upset, and we have guests waiting, he said, his tone authoritative. He glanced at me dismissively before returning his attention to my son. Lucas stood up slowly, his expression hardening. William, I think you should know that I've just discovered something interesting about Atherton Holdings, specifically about where the money I've been sending my father has actually been going for the past 2 years. William's expression didn't change, but I noticed his posture stiffen slightly. I don't know what you're talking about, he said smoothly. But this isn't the time or place for whatever this is. Come back to the party. I'm not going anywhere, Lucas replied, his voice steely. I want to speak with Victoria, now. As if on cue, the door opened again, and Victoria entered, her eyes red-rimmed, but her composure restored. She was stunning in an emerald green dress that probably cost more than my car, her dark hair perfectly styled diamonds glittering at her throat and ears. Lucas, what's happening? Why did you leave our guests? She asked, her voice steady despite the obvious tension. Lucas looked at her with an expression I had never seen on my son's face before, a mixture of rage and profound disappointment. Tell me about the account at First National Bank Victoria, the one where my father's allowance has been going for the last 2 years. Victoria's carefully composed expression faltered for a moment, her eyes darting from Lucas to her father, and then to me. She recovered quickly, stepping further into the room and closing the door behind her. Lucas, darling, can we please talk about this later? She said, her voice soothing, but with a slight tremor. We have over 50 guests out there, including the Morgans, who you've been trying to bring on as investors. I don't care if the president is out there, Lucas said, his voice dangerously quiet. Answer my question, Victoria. Why has the money I've been sending to my father been going into an account that you and your father control? William Thompson stepped forward, placing a protective hand on his daughter's shoulder. Now see here, Lucas. I don't know what kind of accusation you're making, but this isn't about you right now, William. Lucas interrupted, not taking his eyes off Victoria. Though we'll certainly get to your role in this shortly. Victoria's composure cracked a little more. Her perfectly manicured hand went to her throat, fingers nervously touching her diamond necklace. There's been a misunderstanding, she began. No misunderstanding, Lucas cut in. $8,000 a month for 2 years. That's nearly $200,000 that was supposed to go to my father, but instead went to Atherton Holdings. My banker confirmed that you and your father are the only signatories on that account. I stood silently watching this confrontation unfold. Part of me wanted to leave the room to escape the tension and ugliness, but a stronger part needed to hear the truth directly from Victoria. Victoria's eyes welled with tears, but I noticed they didn't fall, careful not to ruin her makeup, perhaps. Lucas, you have to understand. Your father is... She glanced at me, then back to her husband. He's not like us. I was trying to protect you, protect our social standing. Protect our social standing, Lucas repeated incredulously. By stealing from my father. By blocking his calls and messages. By lying to me for 2 years. It wasn't like that, Victoria protested, her voice rising. I did it for us. Do you know how it looks to my friends, to our social circle, that your father is a factory worker? That he lives in that tiny house in that awful neighborhood? People talk, Lucas. I felt as if I'd been slapped. So this was it. Pure snobbery and social climbing. I wasn't good enough for Victoria's world, so she had erased me from her and Lucas's life. Lucas took a step toward his wife, his face flushed with anger. So you decided to steal from him, to cut him out of my life completely. Victoria's father intervened again. Now let's all calm down. I'm sure Victoria had good intentions, even if her methods were unorthodox. The money hasn't been spent frivolously. It's been properly invested. Invested? Lucas laughed bitterly. While my 61-year-old father works 3 jobs to make ends meet while he thinks I've abandoned him. Victoria's facade finally cracked completely. Fine. Yes, I took the money, she shouted. But what was I supposed to do? Every time your father called or texted, I was terrified he'd show up at one of our events in his shabby clothes talking about his factory days or his security guard job. Do you have any idea how hard I've worked to build our social position? I couldn't stay silent any longer. Victoria, I said quietly, that money could have meant I didn't have to work nights as a security guard. It could have meant I didn't have to deliver food in the snow at my age. She turned to me and I was shocked by the contempt in her eyes. Oh, please. You made your choices in life. My father built an empire from nothing. Lucas built his company through brilliance and hard work. You chose to stay in that factory your whole life. Her words cut deep, not because they were true, but because they revealed how little she understood about sacrifice and love. She had no idea that I had given up opportunities and worked those long hours so that Lucas could have the education that led to his success. I stayed at that factory. I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart, so that Lucas could go to MIT and Stanford, so that he could have the opportunities I never had. Every overtime shift, every weekend I worked instead of spending time with my son after his mother died was so that he could have a better life. Lucas stepped between us, facing Victoria. Where did the money go, Victoria? What did you spend it on? Victoria hesitated, glancing at her father. Answer me, Lucas demanded. Fine, I used some of it for my jewelry collection. Some went into renovating the East Wing guest rooms. Some went to my personal investment portfolio. She lifted her chin defiantly. And yes, some went to charity events and social memberships that have helped your status as much as mine. I noticed she was wearing a new diamond bracelet that I hadn't seen earlier in the evening. I wondered if my security guard night shifts had paid for that. Lucas shook his head in disbelief. I can't believe this. I trusted you completely. Victoria's expression suddenly changed, becoming calculating. And what would you have done differently, Lucas? Brought your father to the Palmer Foundation Gala, introduced him to the governor as the man who taught you everything you know. Let's be realistic. You've enjoyed the doors I've opened for you, the connections my family has provided. I watched pain flash across Lucas's face because there was a grain of truth in what she said. He had embraced this wealthy lifestyle. He had allowed himself to be absorbed into Victoria's world. That doesn't justify what you did, Lucas said finally. William Thompson had been watching this exchange with growing impatience. Enough of this drama, he declared. Victoria made some poor choices, but the damage is minimal. Write your father another check, Lucas, and let's return to our guests before they notice something's amiss. The casual dismissal of what had happened, the characterization of deliberate theft and deception as poor choices, and the concern for appearances rather than justice ignited something in me. I had been passive for too long. I stood up straight, looking William directly in the eyes. The damage isn't minimal to me, I said firmly. For 2 years, I believed my son had forgotten me. For 2 years, I worked jobs that left me exhausted and in pain, while your daughter spent money that was meant for me. That isn't a poor choice, that's cruel and criminal. William's face hardened. Watch yourself, old man. You're in my daughter's house speaking to people far above your station. That was the moment I decided I had nothing left to lose. I walked to the door of the study and opened it wide. Actually, I said, looking back at William, this is my son's house, and I think it's time everyone knew exactly what kind of people you and your daughter really are. Without waiting for a response, I walked out into the hallway, heading back toward the party, hearing Lucas, Victoria, and William following close behind. I walked into the grand hall with purpose, aware of the confused glances from the elegantly dressed guests who had noticed the extended absence of our host and hostess. The beautiful Christmas decorations and twinkling lights now seemed like a facade, covering the ugly truth that lay beneath this picture-perfect scene. Lucas caught up with me, putting his hand on my arm. Dad, wait. You do not have to do this. I looked at my son, seeing the conflict in his eyes. I have spent my whole life working honestly, Lucas. I taught you that integrity matters more than money. I am not going to slink away while they pretend nothing happened. Victoria and her father rushed up behind us, both wearing fixed smiles for the benefit of their watching guests. William leaned in, speaking through clenched teeth. This is neither the time nor place. We can resolve this privately. Like you resolved taking nearly $200,000 that was meant for me, I asked loud enough for nearby guests to hear. Several heads turned our way, conversations pausing. Victoria's face flushed crimson. Keep your voice down, she hissed. I had been pushed around enough. For 2 years, I had worked night shifts with arthritis in my knees and back. I had delivered food in snowstorms and stocked shelves until my hands cramped, all while believing my son had moved on without me. The anger I had been containing finally broke free. I do not think I will, I said, raising my voice further. I think your friends should know what kind of people you really are. By now, the nearest group of guests had fallen silent, watching our confrontation with barely disguised interest. Victoria's mother, Elizabeth, approached swiftly, concern etched on her face. What is going on here? She asked, looking between her husband, daughter, and Lucas. Your daughter and husband have been stealing money from me for 2 years, I said plainly. Money that my son sent to help me in retirement. Elizabeth's perfectly composed expression faltered. William, what is he talking about? William Thompson waved his hand dismissively. A misunderstanding about some family finances. Nothing to concern yourself with. Lucas stepped forward. It is not a misunderstanding. Victoria redirected my father's allowance to an account she controls with her father. She blocked his calls and messages, deleted his emails, and lied to me about his circumstances. Meanwhile, my father has been working 3 jobs at age 61 because his pension is not enough to live on. The silence in our immediate vicinity expanded as more guests tuned into the unfolding drama. I could see shock on some faces, uncomfortable recognition on others, as if this confirmed suspicions they might have shown about Victoria. Victoria made one last attempt to salvage the situation. "Lucas, please," she said, touching his arm gently. "You are making a scene. We can talk about this tomorrow." Lucas looked at her hand on his arm, as if it were something alien. "Take your hand off me," he said quietly, but firmly. "I do not want you to touch me right now." Victoria recoiled as if slapped. Her father stepped in his commanding presence, attempting to take control of the situation. "That is enough. Everyone is upset. This is a private family matter that has no place at a holiday gathering." "Is it true?" A new voice entered the conversation. An older gentleman with kind eyes stepped forward from the crowd. "Did you really steal from your father-in-law, Victoria?" I recognized him as Robert Morgan, the potential investor Lucas had mentioned. Victoria's face paled further. "Mr. Morgan, it is a complicated situation," she began. "It does not sound complicated to me," Morgan replied. "It sounds like theft and deception." William Thompson's face contorted with anger. "How dare you judge my daughter without knowing all the facts?" Morgan stood his ground. "I know enough. I know that integrity in business begins with integrity in personal affairs. And I know that how someone treats family says everything about their character." Lucas looked at me, then at the gathered crowd, then back at Victoria and her parents. I could see him making a decision, drawing a line that would change everything. "Victoria," he said, his voice clear and steady, "I want you to leave this house tonight. Pack what you need for a few days. I will have your other things sent to your parents." Victoria gasped. "You cannot be serious. This is my home." "This home was built with my money," Lucas replied. "Money I earned in part because of the sacrifices my father made for my education. I will not have someone who could steal from him living under my roof." William Thompson stepped forward aggressively. "Now you listen to me, young man. You are nobody without our family connections. We made you socially acceptable. Without Victoria, you are just another tech nerd with money." Lucas did not flinch. "I would rather be a tech nerd with money and integrity than whatever it is you think I am with your connections." Elizabeth Thompson, who had been silently watching this exchange, suddenly spoke up. "Victoria, is what they are saying true? Did you really take money meant for your father-in-law?" Victoria looked trapped. She glanced from her mother to her father, then to Lucas, and finally to me. In that moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "Mother, you do not understand the pressure, the expectations," she began. Elizabeth's expression hardened. "So it is true." She turned to her husband. "And you knew about this, William, you helped her." William Thompson's authoritative mask slipped slightly. "Elizabeth, it was just business. The money was being properly managed." "It was theft," Elizabeth said flatly, "from an elderly man working multiple jobs." She looked at me with genuine remorse. "Mr. Williams, I am truly sorry. This is not how we raised our daughter." The revelation that even Victoria's mother was appalled seemed to be the final blow to Victoria's composure. Tears began to fall freely now, ruining the perfect makeup she had been so careful to preserve earlier. "Lucas, please," she sobbed. "I did it for us, for our future, for our social standing." Lucas shook his head, a mixture of sadness and determination on his face. "No, Victoria. You did it for yourself, and our marriage is over because of it." With those words, the crowded room erupted into whispers. Victoria stood frozen for a moment, then turned and ran from the room, her father close behind her. The Christmas party, with its festive decorations and cheerful music still playing in the background, had transformed into the scene of a family's very public disintegration. Lucas turned to the stunned guests. "I apologize for the disruption," he said formally. "But I believe in honesty, a value my father taught me. I would understand if any of you wish to leave." To my surprise, Robert Morgan stepped forward and extended his hand to Lucas. "I think more highly of you now than I did an hour ago," he said. "And I would still like to discuss that investment opportunity perhaps after the holidays." Lucas nodded gratefully, shaking Morgan's hand. Then he turned to me, his expression softening. "Dad, I am so sorry. For everything." I embraced my son, not caring about the watching crowd. "It is not your fault," I assured him. "You did not know." As the party awkwardly resumed around us, with guests pretending to return to their conversations, while obviously discussing what they had just witnessed, Lucas led me away from the crowd. "Let us go somewhere quieter," he suggested. "I think we have a lot to talk about." As we left the grand hall, I caught a glimpse of Elizabeth Thompson watching us, a look of genuine sadness on her face. She gave me a small nod, which I returned. Perhaps not everyone in Victoria's family shared her values after all. In the days following that explosive Christmas Eve, life changed dramatically for both Lucas and me. The morning after the party, Lucas insisted I move into one of the guest suites at his mansion while we sorted things out. I was reluctant at first, feeling out of place among such luxury, but he was adamant. "I have missed 2 years with you, Dad," he said over breakfast in his cavernous kitchen. "I am not letting you go back to working 3 jobs and living alone while we figure this out." Victoria had indeed left that night, taking only a suitcase of clothes and personal items. She was staying at her parents' estate in Woodside, according to the housekeeper, who seemed relieved by her absence. Lucas immediately contacted his lawyer and began the process of filing for divorce. "I should have seen it," Lucas lamented as we sat in his home office later that day. "There were signs. Victoria always managed our social calendar, controlled who we spent time with. She insisted on handling correspondence screening calls. I thought she was just being helpful because I was so busy with the company." I listened as my son unpacked 2 years of deception, trying not to let my own anger at Victoria overwhelm my concern for him. "You trusted your wife, Lucas. That is what you are supposed to do in a marriage." Lucas shook his head, running his hands through his hair in that familiar gesture. "But I should have trusted you too, Dad. I should have made more effort to stay connected. After everything you did for me growing up, I just let you disappear from my life." "We both made mistakes," I said gently. "But Victoria and her father are the ones who deliberately deceived us." At my insistence, Lucas hired a private investigator to look more deeply into Victoria's financial activities during their marriage. What he discovered was even worse than we had initially thought. The investigator, a discreet former FBI agent named Michael Reeves, presented his preliminary findings a week after Christmas. We sat in Lucas's study as Reeves laid out financial records, emails, and bank statements. "Mrs. Westfield has been diverting funds from several accounts, not just the one designated for your father," Reeves explained. "Over the past 3 years, she has redirected approximately $3.4 million to accounts she controls, some jointly with her father. Lucas looked stunned. 3.4 million. How did I not notice this? Reeves gave him a sympathetic look. You are worth billions, Mr. Westfield. These transfers were small enough relative to your total assets to fly under the radar, especially since you trusted your wife to handle many of your personal finances. I watched my son absorb this information, seeing the hurt and betrayal etched on his face. But there was more. There is also evidence, Reeves continued carefully, of an extramarital relationship. Lucas's head snapped up. What? Reeves nodded grimly. Mrs. Westfield has been involved with James Peterson for approximately 18 months. James Peterson, my college roommate, the one who was an usher at our wedding. Lucas looked physically ill. Yes, sir. They have met at a property in Lake Tahoe purchased through Atherton Holdings multiple times. The property was bought with funds traced back to your accounts. I reached out and put my hand on Lucas's shoulder, feeling him trembling beneath my touch. This was a level of betrayal beyond what either of us had imagined. As the weeks passed, Lucas and I began rebuilding our relationship. We spent hours talking about the years we had missed sharing meals, and even watching old movies we had enjoyed when he was younger. Despite the painful circumstances, I treasured this reconnection with my son. One evening in February, as we sat in his living room, with a fire crackling in the massive stone fireplace, Lucas brought up a subject we had been avoiding. Dad, I want to give you the money that should have been yours these past 2 years, and more. I shook my head firmly. No, Lucas. I appreciate it, but I need to make my own way. But that money was meant for you, he protested. And you worked 3 jobs, ruined your health while Victoria was spending it on jewelry and vacations. I considered my words carefully. Son, all my life I have worked for what I have. It has not been much sometimes, but it has been mine earned with these hands. I held up my calloused, work-worn hands. That has always given me a sense of dignity that I value more than comfort. Lucas looked frustrated. So you will keep working those jobs at your age with your arthritis because of pride. Not pride, I corrected him. Self-respect. But no, I do not need to keep all those jobs now. I smiled at him. I have already given notice at the security job and the delivery service. I am keeping my shifts at the grocery store because I enjoy the people there, but just 2 days a week now. Lucas seemed somewhat relieved but still troubled. But how will you manage financially? I have been talking to my pension administrator, I explained. Now that I am not paying off the second mortgage I took for your education, my regular pension is actually adequate for my modest needs. I will be fine, Lucas. My son looked at me with a mixture of admiration and frustration that made me smile. He was so much like his mother, sometimes stubborn and caring in equal measure. Meanwhile, the divorce proceedings began in earnest. Victoria initially tried to claim half of Lucas's considerable fortune, citing her role in building his social connections that had benefited his business. Her father threw his considerable influence behind her, hiring one of the most aggressive divorce attorneys in California. Lucas, on the advice of his own legal team, offered a settlement that was generous, but far less than half his assets. Victoria and her father rejected it outright, choosing to fight in court. It was during this time that Lucas and I decided to meet with Victoria's parents directly, hoping to resolve things without a protracted legal battle. Elizabeth Thompson had reached out to Lucas, suggesting a private meeting away from lawyers. We met at a discreet restaurant in a private dining room. William Thompson was still imperious, though somewhat subdued. Elizabeth seemed genuinely distressed by the whole situation. "This fighting helps no one," Elizabeth said after tense greetings had been exchanged. "Victoria made terrible mistakes, but dragging everything through the courts will only cause more pain and public embarrassment for everyone." And William nodded stiffly. While I do not agree with how this situation has been handled, I can acknowledge that certain indiscretions occurred. Lucas looked at them both steadily. Indiscretions. Your daughter stole millions from me, cut my father out of my life, and had an affair with my college roommate. Those are not indiscretions, William. They are deliberate acts of betrayal. I decided to speak up. Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, I have no desire for public scandal any more than you do. But what Victoria did was wrong, and there needs to be accountability. Elizabeth looked at me with what seemed like genuine remorse. I agree, Mr. Williams, and I want you to know that I had no knowledge of what Victoria and William were doing. I am deeply sorry for the pain my daughter caused you. William shifted uncomfortably. The situation is regrettable. He conceded, which I suspected was as close to an apology as he was capable of offering. What would you consider fair to resolve this matter privately? Lucas had come prepared. He laid out terms. Victoria would receive a one-time settlement significantly smaller than what she had demanded. She would return all diverted funds, including those taken from me, and she would sign a non-disclosure agreement about their marriage. In exchange, Lucas would not press criminal charges for financial fraud or publicly discuss her infidelity. William started to protest the terms, but Elizabeth placed her hand on his arm. It is more than fair, William. More than Victoria deserves, honestly. After a long pause, William nodded curtly. I will discuss it with Victoria and her attorney. 3 days later, Victoria accepted the settlement. I never saw her again after that Christmas night, though Lucas told me she had eventually moved to Europe, apparently unable to face the social consequences in their circles, once rumors of what had happened began to spread. As for the money Victoria had taken from me, Lucas insisted on replacing it, not as charity but as restitution for what was rightfully mine. After much discussion, I finally agreed to accept it, but with one condition: I would use it to establish a small scholarship fund for children of factory workers who wanted to attend college. It felt like the perfect way to honor the sacrifices I had made for Lucas's education while helping others in similar situations. Lucas was deeply moved by this idea and matched my funds significantly, expanding the scholarship's reach. We named it after Sarah, ensuring her memory would live on by helping other families. In April, I moved back to my small house despite Lucas's protests. I needed my own space, my own independence. But things were different now. Lucas visited regularly. We spoke on the phone several times a week. The distance Victoria had created between us was gone, and while I continued working part-time at the grocery store, I now had time for things I had always wanted to pursue: woodworking, fishing, volunteering at the local Veterans Center. For the first time in decades, I was living not just to survive, but to enjoy life. As for Lucas, the divorce was finalized in June. The experience had changed him. He became more cautious about who he let into his life, more appreciative of genuine relationships. He threw himself into work for a while, but by late summer, I noticed him mentioning a woman named Julia, who worked in his company's charitable foundation. Unlike Victoria, Julia had worked her way through state college and built her career through hard work. The few times I met her, I saw how she looked at Lucas with genuine affection, not as a prize or a status symbol. She reminds me a little of Mom, Lucas told me one evening. Not in looks, but in how she sees the world. How she values people for who they are, not what they have. That was perhaps the highest compliment he could give, and it warmed my heart to see my son finding his way to something real and meaningful after the painful lessons he had learned. It has been a full year since that fateful Christmas party that changed everything. I am sitting in my small living room, decorated with a modest Christmas tree in the corner. Through the window, I can see a light snow falling, coating the street, with a pristine blanket of white. At 62, I am finally enjoying the retirement I had once only dreamed of. My small house feels cozy rather than cramped, now that I have had time to properly maintain it. The scholarship fund we established, the Sarah Williams Memorial Scholarship, has already helped 3 deserving students begin their college journeys. One of them, a bright young woman named Alicia, reminds me so much of Lucas at that age, full of determination and dreams. I have fully retired now, even from my part-time job at the grocery store. My days are filled with woodworking projects in the small shed I have converted to a workshop, volunteering at the local community center, teaching basic carpentry to teenagers, and fishing at the lake when weather permits. My back still aches sometimes, a reminder of those years of hard labor, but the pain is manageable now that I can rest when I need to. Lucas visits at least twice a month sometimes, bringing Julia, who has become a welcome presence in both our lives. Their relationship has grown steadily, built on mutual respect and genuine affection rather than social climbing or status. Last month, Lucas mentioned they are considering marriage, though he is understandably cautious after his experience with Victoria. The divorce was finally settled without going to trial, though not without ongoing tension. Victoria received a settlement that was fair, but far less than she had demanded. The revelation of her affair and financial deception had destroyed her standing in the social circles she had valued so highly. According to what little we have heard, she eventually moved to France, where her family had connections. William Thompson's investment firm suffered a significant scandal unrelated to our situation, losing several major clients after questionable practices came to light. I sometimes wonder if the same ethical flexibility that allowed him to help Victoria steal from me had permeated his business dealings as well. Elizabeth Thompson surprisingly reached out to me once with a heartfelt letter of apology for her daughter's actions. I appreciated the gesture, recognizing that parents cannot always control the choices their adult children make. Lucas's company continues to thrive, though he has made significant changes to his lifestyle and priorities. He sold the massive Atherton estate, describing it as filled with bad memories and false values, and moved to a smaller, though still luxurious home closer to his company headquarters. More importantly, he established a foundation focused on educational opportunities for children from working-class families inspired by our story. As for the money Victoria stole from me, I have made peace with that loss. The scholarship fund Lucas and I created has given that difficult experience meaning and purpose. When I see the thank you letters from our scholarship recipients, I feel that something beautiful has grown from something ugly, much like my relationship with my son has been strengthened by the very experience that could have permanently destroyed it. The greatest lesson I have learned through all of this is that true wealth has nothing to do with money. When I was working 3 jobs and struggling to pay my bills, I thought I was poor. Looking back, I realized the real poverty was in those 2 years, when I believed my son had forgotten me, when our relationship had been severed by deception. Now, with our bond restored and strengthened, I feel richer than any billionaire. I have also learned that dignity cannot be bought or sold. Throughout my life, I worked hard, lived honestly, and held my head high even when my clothes were worn and my hands calloused. Victoria and William Thompson, with all their wealth and social status, proved themselves bankrupt in character. True dignity comes not from what we possess, but from how we live and the choices we make, especially when facing adversity. Last week, Lucas asked what I wanted for Christmas this year. I told him the truth: I already have everything I need. The greatest gift has been reclaiming our relationship and seeing him find his way to authentic happiness beyond the superficial world Victoria had pulled him into. Watching him reconnect with the values I had tried to instill in him, seeing him use his wealth to help others while finding joy in simple things, these are gifts beyond measure. Sometimes I wonder what Sarah would think of all that has happened. I like to believe she would be proud of how her son turned adversity into opportunity, how he did not let betrayal harden his heart. I think she would approve of Julia, who shares her kind spirit and authentic nature. And I hope she would be proud of me too for maintaining my dignity through difficult times and for helping Lucas find his way back to what truly matters. As the snow continues to fall outside my window, I feel a deep sense of peace. Life is rarely perfect. It throws unexpected challenges our way, sometimes in the form of financial hardship, sometimes as personal betrayal. What matters is not what happens to us, but how we respond, whether we allow adversity to embitter us or strengthen us. Sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as painful lessons. Had Victoria not been exposed that Christmas night, Lucas and I might have continued our separate lives, connected only by her carefully curated lies. Our current closeness, the scholarship fund helping deserving students, Lucas's more authentic approach to life, none of this would have happened without that difficult revelation. That is perhaps the most profound truth I have discovered. Our deepest wounds can lead to our most valuable discoveries, not about others, but about ourselves and what truly matters in this precious life we are given. Have you ever experienced a betrayal that ultimately led to something positive in your life? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to be reminded that integrity and authentic relationships are worth more than all the wealth in the world. Thank you for listening, and may your holidays be filled with genuine connections and moments of true joy.